And I chose my topic, and then I figured out how I'm going to teach it. But I got enough chomer. I came to yeshiva tonight. I go over to Beto Lipsker. I say, maybe you can help me. Now I have too much chomer. Too much material. The subject is the big day srod. I'll tell you what it is, and it's one of those things that's so obscure in the Torah, but like nobody even bothers discussing it. We all know the Keilim wore clothes. There were also the clothing of the Keilim, of the vessels. The Mishkan was carried, as you know, right? The beams and the curtains were carried in wagons, but the vessels were carried on people's shoulders. They were covered in garments. Those garments are called big day srod. Rashi mentions in Parshas that they were only wool. There was no linen. Blue, purple, red, but there was no linen. One of the distinctions of the big day srod, there was no linen. And I believe there's profundity and significance in this, although none of the Mepharshim that I found observes this union. So in the Parshas Pekudei, the end of Exodus, the Chumash mentions the big day srod. From blue and purple and red, they made the garments of srod. The place where it's explained at length is in our Parsha. What I did here was I actually wrote out how they covered each garment. The Aron HaKodesh was covered by 3 garments: a pareches, a tachash skin, and a blue wool garment. The table was first covered with a blue wool garment. Then on top of the blue wool garment, they put the vessels and the bread. On top of the bread and the vessel, they put a red wool garment and then a tachash skin. The Unera was a blue wool garment and a tachash skin. And the vessels were underneath. The inner Mizbeach, a blue wool garment and tachash skin. The vessel in the Mizbeach, blue wool garment, tachash skin. Outer Mizbeach, purple wool garment. On top of the purple garment went the vessel in the Mizbeach and tachash skin. Basically, they were all covered. They were all covered. But there's a lot of nuance, a lot of differences. Differences in the way they were covered and the differences in what they were covered. And my issue was, first of all, basically, what's the significance of the big day srod? What's the significance of covering? Obviously, you're covering the garments. People shouldn't see them, to honor them. Why cover them twice? Some of them were covered 3 times. Why this color? Why that color? Why your skin? Why your wool? Everything is perfect in the Torah. Everything is absolutely perfect in the Torah. And I've always had a curiosity. What is the depth? What is the pnimius behind the way this thing was all arranged, the way they covered the big day, the Keilim of the big day srod? Here's what I want to do. I want to read the Chumash. Learn the Chumash. Then we're going to learn various Mepharshim. But today's focus is the Rebbe Sikha. And we're actually going to learn the Rebbe Sikha almost first. Because the Rebbe Sikha is a Rashi Sikha. And it's so brilliant. I hate to say it. The real version of the Rebbe Sikha is that it's based on the words in the Psukim. We're not going to learn the questions. It's a very long Sikha. I printed the whole Sikha here. You're welcome to do it for homework. We're just going to learn the Rebbe's conclusions. And the conclusions are going to literally resolve every detail and enlighten all the nuances. All the nuances are going to be enlightened with the help of the Rebbe Sikha. After we learn, we're going to first learn Rabban and Rashi, Rabban and Rabbi Nechais, a few words. So we'll learn those first. Then the Rebbe Sikha. Then I have a Medrash, an Abarbanel, and a Dekanti. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. We don't have enough time. So I haven't yet decided I think I'm going to skip the Medrash, but I very, very in detail underlined and arrowed the Medrash. You'll have an easy time finding. The Medrash goes into a lot of the details. The Abarbanel is very nice. The Dekanti is Kabbalah. And at the end, we're going to go back to the Rebbe Sikha, because the Rebbe has the Hasidus, and the Hasidus is so glad, it's so reich. As soon as they opened the Rebbe Sikha, all of a sudden Big Day Srod made sense. It was like a closed book to me. I spent hours, mamish, from Sunday I'm looking. I decided I'm doing this, now I made the circle, now I got to get the arrow in, or I made the arrow, now I got to make the circle around it. And I couldn't get to the core of it. And the Rebbe Sikha gemacht lichtig, mamish lichtig. So let's start. Now I want you to know how much I love Eli Wallen. I made these copies, and after I made the copy, I said, you know what? I'm writing a page in English. I went back, I made the copies, and you'll notice there's 2 staples. One staple for the whole packet, and the second staple is miyuchad just for Eli Wallen's attendance tonight. Okay?
He said he was coming.
Yeah, mitzvah. God's help. So, we're going to read this parsha. I'm doing this quick, okay? We're going to learn the Chumash. I'm reading the Chumash with you. Okay? We're going to start Pasuk Daled, okay? Pasuk Hey, verse 5. It came time for the Jewish people to travel. The cloud went up, and by the way, I'm not certain, I can't promise, but I believe that 2 weeks from now is Baal Leischa. Could be I'll do the Masois then. It could be, the journeys. But in any case, Pasuk Hey says, Uba, as soon as it was time to travel, Aaron Ubanov ben Seyah Machen. As soon as the camp started to travel, Aaron and his sons came into the base of Mikdash. And they removed the parechas, the curtain that separated the holy from the holies of holies, the kisubos arna kedesh, and they covered the holy ark. And it's described in the Midrashim, they came in with these hooks. The arna kedesh the parechas was very massive. It was 10 amos by 10 amos. It was very, very large and very heavy. It had these hooks, they unhooked it. They disengaged it from its beam, the pole which held it in place, and they gently lowered it over the Yarden so that they shouldn't see the Yarden. They had these long poles, like that they use sometimes to reach high places, and they would unhinge the pareches at the top from its beam and lower it over the Arna Kedesh. They covered it with a skin of tachash, and they covered on top of that a garment which is completely chelis, or blue wool, no mile of samubadav, and they placed the beams. Now, the samubadav is a complexity because there was a lav de eraise, layasuram imenu. The beams of the Arna Kedesh were never removed; they were there all the time. In fact, the Gemara says that the Arna Kedesh was designed in such a way that the beams poked out of the curtain, kedade isha, like a woman's bosom. So they were always present. So the samubadav means they made arrangements that you should be able to get to the beams. It's all covered, but the beams are somehow sticking out. Then it says, Val Shulchan HaPanim. It took the table of Panim. Panim means it's a face, you can see through it. This is a very, very weird thing that they did. They removed the bread from the table. The table has bread on top of it. And if you understand how the Shulchan was designed, the bread was on top of the table, but it was almost like a vessel on top of the vessel. There was a table, and around it they built like a whole rack, and the breads were mostly on the rack. So even though technically the breads were on the table, but you could almost like remove the table and leave the racks with the breads for the most part. So they took out the table by itself, and yifes all of veget chelis, and they covered it with a blue garment. Then they put the racks back on top of the table, on top of the blue garment. The various vessels, that basically means the rack. And the bread was on top of the blue vessel, Allah Mamayla. So you had a blue vessel just on the table. On top of the table you had the Keilim plus the lechem upon him. On top of the two, they put beget elah shani, red, from a certain word that has a red blood. That's what the dye was. The kisuvay said it was covered again, with a skin of tachash. The Psalm was bad, and again they made arrangements that the poles should stick out. So the Shulchan had 3 coverings, like the Aron did.
So Lecha went back into the rack?
Right, but on top of the beged klul, chelis. Next, pasuk test. They took a garment of chelis. Now notice that by the Aron the word kalil was used. Now we're using chelis, and we forgot the word klil. There's mistakes in the Eibishter's Torah. Right, the pasuk vav it says beged klil chelis. In pasuk zayin it doesn't say, and in pasuk test it doesn't say. The kisu with menorahs hamad. They covered the menorah, the candles. And inside, with the menorah, was esneder sevas malkachas machtesev. The candles themselves, the candelabra, the candles themselves, and the tweezers and the pans, all were underneath this garment of blue. As well as all the vessels used to prepare the oil. And all of this was then covered on top with the skin of tachash. So the whole menorah with the vessels, with everything was together, covered by blue, and on top of the blue was tachash. And of course they put it on a staff. The menorah didn't have any badim, so they would somehow tie it up, and there was a vertical pole that was somehow run across the breadth of the Aron, and that's how they carried it. The Menorah. Next, on the inner Mizbeach, the golden Mizbeach, Yifus Beged Chelos, they put a blue garment. The Kisu Eisei Michser Tachash, they covered it again with the garment of the skin called Tachash. The Sam was Badav, and they made sure that the poles were protruding. And here's an interesting thing. When it came to the Mizbeach HaZahav, the vessels were separate from the Mizbeach. By the Shulchan, they were separated by a blue garment, they were together. By the Mizbeach HaChitzon, you'll see they were also only separated by a garment. The inner Mizbeach garments were a separate identity. They took all the vessels of service, which were used specifically for the Mizbeach HaPnimi. Rashi Pasuk Yud Beis, Heim Kliak Tedes, which was the Mizbeach HaPnimi. Nosno Beged Chelos, they were tied in a garment of blue. The Kisu they were covered with a skin of a covering of Tachash, the skin of Tachash. Nosno Lamet was put on a staff. Then the outer Mizbeach, the Dishnu was on Mizbeach, they would remove the ash in the Mizbeach. First, Rashi said they put a psachter, a copper vessel on top of the Mizbeach itself, because there was a fire that always burned, and they didn't want that fire should destroy the curtain, so they covered it with a metal vessel. They put it in a garment of purple wool. And Argaman is understood to be a redder red than Telas Shani. They took away the ash. The Nasrullah was called Keilim. On top of this redder than red, this purple garment, they put the vessels of the Adam Mizbeach. Esam Machtes, Esam Mizlogis, Esam Yoim, Esam Mizrokis. When you don't know what they mean, you skip them, you know. Machtes means the pan, Mizlogis means the shovel. Mizlogis means the pitchfork that they used. There's a word to turn the meat. Yoim were the big vessels for large quantities of ash, and Mizrokis were the basins that they sprinkled the blood with. It was covered with a tachash skin. The Somabadav, they put their pillars on top. So the Adam Mizbeach had only two garments, but between the first and second garment went the vessels. Now here's the point. We got 5 vessels. We have 5 different possibilities. Everything's so complicated. Nothing could be uniform. It's more or less the same, but only more or less. Everyone is a little different. Now, in case you're confused, I simply wrote it down for you on the cover. You can notice the differences. Yeah? First of all, the Aron HaKodesh. Right, the Aron HaKodesh had a Parshas. The Parshas between Keilim and top of the Aron. Then it was Tachash, and then it was blue. The table was blue, then the vessels and the bread, then red, then Tachash. The Menorah was blue, then Tachash. The inner Mizbeach was blue, then Tachash. But by the inner Mizbeach, they separated the Mizbeach from the vessels, and the Menorah they didn't. So even though they're both blue, then Tachash, but they're not the same. This is the Eibishter's trick. We're going to do everything a little different. Now you scratch your head. You understand what I'm saying? By the Menorah, the Keilim went with the Menorah. By the Shulchan and the Mizbeches, it did not. Right. The Shulchan's Keilim was separated from the Shulchan by a blue vessel, blue garment. The inner Mizbech, it was totally separate. The Mizbech had blue, then Tachash. The garments were in a sack of blue, covered by a sack of Tachash. The Adam Mizbech was covered with a purple skin, purple wool. Then they put the vessel, and then the Tachash skin. In other words, pretty much
every possibility,
every variation of this was employed. Look in Rashi. Clay Haktevis. How big it is?
Just like that?
Yeah.
Just this thing?
Is it okay to ask you this time about the Takash skin? I know you're going to get into it
The
at
who?
some point. Takash.
Wait a second.
Okay, let's say the Keteris over here somewhere?
In the Mizbech.
That was the one. Just one thing was Keteris. What was in it?
Only for the Kedei of Keteris, that's it.
In the Mizbech is only Keteris.
The vessel in the Mizbech, right. Now, so of course the question is, what's all this stuff going on? What's the Torah? Well, what's the Pnimis? Is there significance to this? Of course, in addition to the obvious idea of Tznius. Now.
No, just to ask just a general question. The coverings were in between the use. I mean, for instance, the Mizbeach, it's saying Chitzon. This was covered with blue. Was covered with the tablish and so on. During its use.
Transport.
Only transport. Only transport. Now, first of all, there's a fantastic diak from the Rebbe. I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. There's 2 terms in the Chumash. One is beged. and the other is kisui. The wool is called beged. Beged argoman. Beged, a garment of wool. A garment of purple. A garment of red. What is a garment? A garment is made for specifications, made to fit your size. The tachash skin is called kisui, a covering, like a poncho or a tarpaulin. The tachash skin was not so precisely tailored to the size of the vessels. So the wool contributor, the wool participant in this process is called a garment. And it was made to dress, to be a garment that's tailored to the precise size of the various vessels. The tachash skin was sort of like just thrown over as a tarpaulin. The difference in a wool garment and animal skin is obvious. Wool is much softer, it's much more comfortable, it's much more fine. Animal skin is animal skin. Now you want me to talk about the tachash, there's a lot of, the Gemara speaks about it in Masechta Shabbos. Essentially the tachash was an animal, according to the Gemara, that was only there lefi shah. It was a temporary entity that did not exist before, appeared miraculously for this purpose. There's even a question if it was kosher. And Gemara says it was a unicorn. The taka had one horn on its head. And there's an opinion that other Medician brought a carbon that was a unicorn. And some say that this was the tachash, but others say that it's not the same thing. And tachash was an animal. The unique characteristic of tachash was that its skin was gorgeous. Multicolored and absolutely gorgeous.
Any extant? Is there any existing?
I don't think so. If it is, it's buried with the Mishkan. And when that guy from Texas finds the Mishkan, he'll find the...
Then he can clone a little tiny and make a whole animal.
Okay, well...
Unicorn means what? Means like
with one horn.
No,
Kedesh, Keden, Achad, Hoyle, B'mitzchi.
because the way they picture it now, it's like a horse with a horn.
Oh, what people picture, this is all about, this is hallmarks making parnasa. That's all.
So what kind of animal was it?
It was a shayr. It was a kosher animal. According to the opinion that this is the same animal that other British was makriv, it was said to be a kosher animal.
Unicorn means just one horn.
Uni is the opposite of two, right? Bi,
One horn.
right? So the information I'm going to give you up front is they covered everything twice. It's like wearing a shirt and a coat. That's the point. One was more intimate, one was more personal, and then was more a throw. The strange thing about it was that the Aron HaKodesh had the clothing on backwards. It had the tachash skin underneath and the wool garment. And notice how I translated the words. Tachash skin, blue wool garment. I dafke translated this way based on the Rebbe's Sikha. Okay? So, we don't know the meaning of it, but we hear the reason, the balabatishkeit. In other words, the logical, everything was given a shirt to fit and then something to wrap. The details are still very, very obscure. Why the Aron had a pareches, why in some cases the vessels were directly on top, like by the menorah, why in some cases the vessel had to be separated from the keli itself by a garment, like by the shulchan and like by the outer mizbeach. How come by the shulchan on top of the vessel it have two more garments, and by the outer mizbeach it just have one more garment? And how come by the mizbeach haptimi the keilim were totally separate from the mizbeach itself? All of these details the Rebbe analyzes in Pshutei Shel Mikra, Nigla, Rashi, the Bald, Meidendik.
And I'm just thinking there's a general trend if you leave out the Aron HaKodesh.
Of course, yes. But the problem is you can't leave out the Aron HaKodesh,
sure.
and therefore there is no trend.
So it crystallizes the issue and the difference here, that you would think that the blue wool garment is finer because it's closer to the keilim, and the tachash skin is tougher and it's more makivdik and it's tougher. So therefore it's on the outside.
That's correct.
And so therefore the question is, why would something that is tougher and more makivdik be used in the reverse order and be closer when it comes to
Okay, yeah, good point. Yeah, absolutely correct. Okay, now, here's what we're going to do. Let's learn Rashi. Turn 2 pages, page Mem Dalet. The Chumash from which I copied this Rashi has a feature called Moisef Rashi. Moisef Rashi means page Mem Dalet. Now you're going much too far.
I got it.
Oh, you've already gone too far. Here it is. Right there. The Chumash which I copied from has what's called Moisef Rashi. Moisef Rashi means that they, in addition to the Rashi, they quote Rashi from other places in Torah and in Chazal that are relevant. So we have here a Rashi that's actually in Parshas Pekudei. And I was going to actually make a copy of that Parsha, but the Moisef Rashi was generous enough for me, so the Lubavitch Yeshiva saved a piece of paper and a little ink. He brings the pasuk about, the pasuk says, Umenat cheles va'agoman v'telas hashani, from the blue and red and purple wools. Also big they strad, they made garments of strad, of honor, of royalty. The Shabbos Ba'Kodesh to serve Hashem in holiness. Good evening, welcome, thank you for coming. So Rashi is wondering, what are the big day strad? What are these garments that are called strad for royalty? The reason it's a question is because we know that the garments of the Keilim were made from blue, red, and purple wool and linen, and also gold. In this pasuk in Parshas Pekudei, it mentions only that they were made from blue, purple, and red wool. There's no mention of linen. So Rashi says that as big day asrad, hey big day hatcheles. Now this may be this may be a pasuk in Parshas Kisisa, but the same difference. Hey big day hatcheles v'agomat la'shani. This is a reference to the blue and purple and red garments. Ha'amur and Parshas HaMasais, which are described in the section of the travels, which is our Parsha. V'natnu al-beged cheles, a parcel al-beged argamon, a parcel al-beged la'shani. It doesn't refer to the Keilim of the Kohanim, because the Keilim of the Kohanim also had linen. And these garments were only wool. Now if you recall 2 weeks ago when we talked about wool and linen, I'm really throwing something in here that's a wrench. The wool represents chesed of kesed, and the linen represents the gevuras of kesed. Now gevura is better than chesed, but too much gevura leaves you in the dark. It may be very good for the people who are holy, but not for the rest of us. The big day thread only had wool, there was no linen. Right? The Kohen Hedjit's clothing were only linen and no wool. The Kohen Gadol's clothes were shatnez, wool and linen. The big day thread were only wool. So that's it. Now we have a Ramban I want to read, and then I want to read the Rabbeinu B'chaya. Nobody speaks too elaborately about this. It's mamish a few words. And when we finish the Rashi and the Ramban, we're going to learn the Rebbe next, and then we're going to go back to the Abarbanel and to the Rekanti based on time allowance. They put on it a skin of tachash, or parcel beged, a garment, kultchels, perfectly wool, mamayla on top of it. So the Aron was backwards. They put the shirt on top of the coat, right? All the vessels, the coat was on top of the shirt. The kisui was on top of the beged. Here the beged was on top of the kisui. Says the Ramban, why? Professor, doctor, why? Since the Aron was such on a high level, you didn't see on top of it the skin of tachash. Avo, but rather, you saw blue. Now what about the fact that you don't want to put a rough skin right next to the Aron? So they added a third layer. That's his resolution. Since they didn't want the tachash to be on the outside, and you'll see in Mitzvah Hashem when we get to the Rekanti Al Pi Kabbalah why this is. You don't want tachash on the outside. You want tachash to be underneath. On the other hand, you don't want to have the tachash skin right next to the Aron. Tachash skin is rough. That's why the Aron has an extra layer. First you put the pareches, which was actually wool and linen, but it was soft. Then the tachash skin, and then on top of it you put the tcheles. The blue. They covered it with the curtain that separated between the holy and holy of holies, which was usually the wall that separated from the rest of the Beis HaMikdash. And then you put the tachash skin on top, so that the tachash skin, which is rough, shouldn't be directly connected to the Aron. And then I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. You covered the two of them. The two of them means the pareches and the Aron. The mirchei tachash with the animal skin of tachash, it was thick and it was waterproof, protected against rain. On top of that whole situation, they put beged, a garment, klil, that was absolutely perfect tcheles of blue wool, mamayla on the very top. She need Allah beged anichbad, that the most honorable color in the Beis HaMikdash should be visible. Most of the garments you saw tachash. The animal skin tachash. Animal skin tachash was gorgeous, but animal skins are much more rough than wool. And al pi Kabbalah, animal skin is a much lower level. Leather is a much lower level than wool. Kabbalistically, that's a much lower level. But the Aron HaKodesh, they reversed the order so that it shouldn't be covered with the animal skin, it should be covered with wool, so that it should look on the outside beautiful as well. And the fact that there was the problem of tachash being next to the Aron, so they used 3 garments. Problem solved. Yeah. So we're hearing that there's precision in the nuance, in the detail. What is unique about the color blue? I'm sorry? What is unique about the color blue? We once learned about this last year. Mishpatim, we learned about it. The color blue is reminiscent of the heavens. Now I want to make you understand that the idea that the Chazal say that the Tchelis is Dema L'Rakia, the blue of the Mishkan is similar to the heavens, and the Kia Dema, the Kisya covered. And the heavens are like the heavenly throne. What do we know about the heavenly throne? So we learned about it in Parshas Mishpatim, I think, that the heavenly throne is opaque, it has no color. And that's why you see in it yourself. The Eibishter mirrors. What does God look like? He's a mirror of you. Everybody sees in the Kisya covered themselves. It says, it's a gewaltige Gedank. And the color blue is the marshal for this phenomenon. The heavens are actually transparent. And the color blue, whatever, there's different explanations for why it is. I don't know. Maybe one of our physicists or doctors can enlighten us. But the color blue, therefore, comes to symbolize the Kisya covered. And the Kisya covered was Ein Sof. Ein Sof is colorless. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, there's a good word. It's transparent spiritually, and because it's transparent spiritually, you see of God yourself. You see the good of yourself and the not good of yourself. So the color blue represents this. So when the Aron is from the outside, that a Jew sees it and he remembers the Eibishter, and he realizes that when he relates to the Eibishter, his relationship to the Eibishter is a mirror of himself. The rest of the garments, at least some of them, the shulchan, right, where's our list? The table, right? Mm-hmm. And the inner mizbeach and the menorah also had blue, but the blue was covered. In the Aron, the blue was on the outside, so you saw a symbol of the Kisya covered, and the avodah is, you see the Kisya covered, you remember your own whatever. We won't get into it, as they say in the real world. Shane? This is the Ramban. And that's the translation of the word. Etzem hashamayim lo teir, as the essence of the heaven is transparent. The word teir means without color. The rest of the vessels, hashulchan, v'maneda, the table and the candelabra, v'mizbeches, and the 2 altars, who also had a wool garment, and several of them had blue garments. However, you covered the wool. It's not honor. You saw on top the skin of tachash, because it's rougher, and the wool is finer and needs to be respected and kept private. Except for the Aron HaKodesh. Now, the Yeshemin, there's another opinion. Kitam HaKosov, that the precision, the reason it says the Pasuk, Beged Klil Tchelas Momoila, the reason it says that they put the garment of perfectly blue wool on top is Lapareches HaMasach, was on top of the curtain for the Kedesh HaKadoshim. The Nosnu Alav Al Ha'aron V'Apareches Ksul Yer Tachash, the Ksul Yer Tachash. In other words, there are those who say, and the Rebbe mentions it in the Sikha, if I'm understanding this Ramban correctly, that in fact, what I wrote on my chart is wrong. First I had the pareches. On top of the pareches went the blue wool, and on top of the blue wool went the tachash skin. Even though in the Chumash it's described there's a tachash skin one on top, but you can read the words, the Hebrew, as though it were to say they put the pareches, and then the parach, the beged kol chelos milmoila on top of the pareches, and the nafnu alav tachash means on top of everything. So in other words, the pasuk is not written in order. This resolves the question, very balabatish. Why is the Aron different than anything else? And the answer is it's not. First was the pareches, then was the blue, and then was the tachash. But the Ramban offers a different insight, a more spiritual insight. But the Aron HaKodesh, because it's the holiest garment, you had to see the blue on the outside to remind you of the Kisei HaKavod, as opposed to the other garments. In other words, there's a simple solution that the Pasuk's not written in order. But the Ramban first gives us a different pshat. Did I lose you yet?
No, go on. Just wondering.
Sorry?
What is there in order?
You have to read the Pasuk. And the way you read it is, you would take the Vayridu was Parechas Pasuk Mendalet, same page, yes? Parechas, Vayridu is Parechas HaMasach, Tuch is Parechas HaMasach, but Kisa Basa HaMagidis. But Nosnu Alav, Alav means the top of everything. Ksuya Tachash, a skin of Tachash. Uparsu, but they had already placed a beged, a garment, Klut Chel, Tufik Blue, Milmoila on top of the Aron itself. That's how the Ramban translates it, according to this second pshat. But according to his first pshat, the blue was taka on the outside, till at least in the other you saw the heaven. You saw something reminiscent of the heavens.
Where do you see he says the other way around?
Read the words. The Yeshemrim, ki atam akos apostle begit klot chelos memoila is leparechas hamasach. Right on top of the parechas. But nosnu alav ala aron v'aparechas means the whole gamut, including the blue. You understand? Now don't think I'm such a big genius that I haven't said Pashit in the Sikh. I would never figure this out. This is the Ramban. Now, Rabbeinu Bechaya. Right. Now the Rabbeinu Bechaya. So you got to turn a few pages, turn your staple to the right. You have a Medrash Shabbat. Notice I very, very detailed, underlined and arrowed, so you should have trouble. The Rabbeinu Bechaya is short, but he does offer a little more insight. Oh, no. Actually, the Rabbeinu Bechaya offers nothing. You found it? The page that I scribbled on. There we go. Uba Aaron Uvanav. Seder Kisi Koya Mishkan. This is simply a recapitulation of the facts. This is the order of how they covered the vessels of the Mishkan. Ala Aaron Kisu Asaparechas. On top of the holy ark, they play you into fire. Ala Aaron Kisu Asaparechas. Right on top of the holy ark, they put the curtain. Va'alav Mechsir Tachash. Above it, they put the garment of Tachash. Umilmaila Parsha Beged Chelas. On top of the two was the blue. The table was covered with blue. Keilim, on top of the blue were the vessels. Now remember, there's a catch. It wasn't only the vessels. It was the bread. Because the vessels were the rack that held the bread. So the breads were also on top of the blue. And on top of that, all that, they had a red garment. On top of all that was the skin. The candelabra, they didn't make any distinction between the candelabra itself and its utensils and its vessels. They covered it with blue. And as I put on my sheet, I didn't put on my sheet, I should have put it. The menorah went with its vessels together. The golden altar distinctly for incense. Was a blue garment. And on top of the blue was the Tachash skin. Now remember, the Mizbeach, the inner Mizbeach, the vessels were in like a sack. It was separate completely, first blue and then Tachash. In other words, no two are alike. That's the bottom line. Mizbeach and Achosh is the copper Mizbeach. Shu Mizbeach oil, the altar for sacrifice. Peis Beged Agama was covered with purple. And the Rabbeinu Bechaya explains, Shu Adam Yesemi Beged Shani, it's redder than the red of the other one. Kisham Zeken Akabanas, they threw the carbonates. On top of the purple went, I want to add, the vessels. On top of the vessels went the skin of Tachash. Nimtis Lamed.
And you did mention that there was a copper over skin, right?
Not a skin, a psachtet, a vessel, an upside down, turned over a pot, upside down. Right. That was a technical aspect, it seems, according to Rashi. The Pasuk doesn't mention it, Rashi mentions it. Nimtis Lamed, so it turns out the following. Shebachala Keilim, all the vessels. Bein Shiu Ben Tcheles Eishani Oyagaman. Whether they were covered with blue, red, or purple. Kulon Mechusa Be'etachash. All had a wrap, an outer skin of the animal called Tachash. Ru HaMichsa Ha'elyin Yinal Kulon. That was the outer skin that you saw. Chutz Me Ha'aron. Minus the Aron. Shalirot V'Akos Alamid Michsa Ha'tachash Kishar HaKeilim. The Torah does not want to place the Tachash skin on the outside. Elashia Michsa Ha'elyin Tcheles. The outer skin should be blue wool. Clearly the Rabbeinu Bechaya is paraphrasing the Ramban, that the blue was on the outside. Now, we understand the significance of blue being on the outside because it's reminiscent of the heavens that remind you of the transparency and how our reality is a mirror of ourselves. But why the Tachash skin underneath? right? When you have two things, and one is affecting the other, the second is affecting the first as well. Why was usually the tachash on the outside, and when it came to the other tachash was on the inside? This we have to leave for the dekanti and for the mercy of the clock. It's a combination of factors. The dekanti times mercy of the clock equals enlightenment. Okay? Now we're going to learn the Rebbe Sich. The Rebbe Sich is a Rashi Sich. I don't even know what the questions are, and I certainly am not going to allow us to delve into the particulars of the questions. We're going to begin. It's the back of your packet at the bottom of page 135. So if you want to close your book and just go back to the bottom of 135, you're welcome to do that.
Can I ask one question here? Because now you have in mind thinking of something now.
Please.
Ceilings and floors, meaning, did you touch that just now? Meaning that like the top side of the parachas touches the bottom side of the takash, and yet the back side of the parachas doesn't touch it. You know what I'm saying? It's a separation in itself, isn't it?
It's a good observation. It's beyond the scope.
Really one thing, though, actually.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there. I'll take myself out of it too if I think like this.
Okay, now. Bottom page 135. The Rebbe wants to know what's going on with this whole situation. Now remember, the Rebbe is a Rashi Sich, which means that the Rebbe's analysis is very exact and very precise and very detailed. It's too much for us. It's just exhausting. We're going to simply focus on the conclusions of the Rebbe as it relates to our discourse, which is what's going on with these garments that they covered. So I already told you the key to the Rebbe's insight. The key point of the Rebbe is that everything was covered with essentially a shirt and a poncho. A properly tailored outfit that was designed specifically for the Keilim. It fits snug and was in all cases -1. A comfortable wool. And then on top of it there was a wrap, just a wrap of the tachash skin, with the lone exception of the other. And in the Chumash they have different labels. The wool is called beged, a garment, a shirt. The tachash skin is called kisoy, a covering. Even in the Aron, where the tachash is underneath and the wool is on top, the tachash is still called kisoy. The tachash is underneath, it's still called a wrap. The garment went on top of the wrap. The Aron HaKodesh wore its shirt on top of its coat, basically. Meshuggah style.
But it was wearing tzitzis.
Wearing tzitzis, was it tzitzis, the Parshas? Okay. So here we already have a very basic geschmack into what's going on here. Now it's already interesting. They gave every garment a shirt that fits, and then a shirt that doesn't fit. So I can't control myself. Let me tell you the geschmack here. Let me tell you the point here. The point here is, there's a halacha about carrying tefillin to a mikveh, carrying mezuzah into a mikveh, having a sefer Torah in a bedroom. That in order to be able to do that, you have to have two coverings. But the effect of this is the two coverings works only if one of the coverings is not the bag of that item. When you put tefillin in a bag, and it's a tefillin bag, it can be one covering. But if you have two tefillin bags, it's not enough. One could be the shirt of that kli kodesh, that holy item. The second has to be a wrap. The second has to be something that's not specifically for the tefillin, for the mezuzah, for the sefer Torah. Then it's properly covered. So there's two, I guess. No, the plastic doesn't work. No. But you have tefillin, you have two bags. I don't know. There's two bags of tefillin. The point is, you're covering something. You're covering it to honor it, and you're covering it to hide it. Covering it to honor it. You have a shirt. To cover it to hide it, take something which is really not designed for it, and wrap it. The Keilim are holy. They're being exposed, they're being carried. Exposure is not respectful. So you put him on this shirt, but the shirt's not enough. So on top of the shirt you put a wrap, because the shirt is still exposed. Even if you put on every keli its shirt, it's not covered, because the shirt is designed for the keli. And because the shirt is designed for the keli, it's still not respectability. You put on top of it a wrap, which is foreign, which is alien, which is not directly connected to the keli, now it's tzniistic. The wrap alone is not enough. First of all, you need to have two. Second of all, it's not respectful to put a keli of Hashem, a person without any clothes, you put on a winter coat. It's not appropriate. So first you put on, hello, welcome. First you put on, we're learning our Parsha at the end, talks about the fact that when they traveled, the vessels were covered. You're familiar with that, right? Each vessel was covered at least with two coverings. That's as much information I'm going to share, but you're 40 minutes, 57 seconds into it. Okay, so the first point that Rebbe makes is, why do you have to have two? One is called a beged, a shirt. The other is called a kisui, a wrap and a covering. The shirt is on the inside in almost every case, because the malbush, everything is supposed to have its own garments. But for it to be properly covered, you have to have a double covering, and the second covering has to be alien, not normally connected to the keli. Then it's covered. In the Aron HaKodesh, they put the wrap underneath and the garment on top. Why? We'll find out. But the bottom line is, it had two coverings, and one covering was alien. And the Rebbe says that Api Halacha, the Rebbe says Chiddush, you can learn from this, Rashi, a Chiddush in Halacha. So when you have to cover tefillin with two coverings, one has to be the natural covering of the tefillin, and the other has to be a natural covering of the tefillin. It doesn't matter if the unnatural covering is underneath. Normally, you put tefillin in their bag, and then you put the bag in another bag. It's the second bag that's alien, and together they properly cover the tefillin, honor the tefillin. But if you put the plastic bag underneath and the tefillin bag on top, it's still good, and the proof is from the Yoren. That they put the tachash skin underneath and the wool on top. So this is essentially the Rebbe's comment and the Rebbe's insight. That in Pshutei Shel Mikra, Chumash Rashi, the Rebbe's learning Chumash Rashi. In Chumash Rashi, the Torah is teaching us, you're carrying the vessels. You're covering them because it's tznius. Put them on a shirt that's appropriate, and then throw over a wrap. Now it's tzniistic. In the case of the Yoren, there's a reason why you have to do it in reverse. What's so brilliant about the Rebbe's commentary, amongst other things, is he goes through each one and analyzes the nuance. He doesn't concern himself with the colors. Blue, red, purple don't bother him. But why by the Shulchan, where there were three wraps, and then by the Aron, there were three wraps? All the vessels had only two. Why by the Shulchan, they put the blue, then they put the bread and the racks on top, and two on top of that? By the menorah, the vessels were together with the menorah. By the inner mizbeach, they were totally separate. By the outer mizbeach, you had the shirt, the vessels, and then the wrap on top. Every one of these details is analyzed by the Rebbe. And it's genius. And the most amazing thing is that the Rebbe learns it in the Pshutei Shel Mikra, but that level of depth, that's homework. That we're not going into. In other words, how it reads into Rashi, it's beyond us.
I was anticipating that it might have something to do with outlining the shape of it, meaning that the garment could define its shape,
yeah.
And therefore you could...
That's correct.
But you just changed it, because you said, compare... Okay.
The Aron was an exceptional thing. Halachically, it's not an imperative. Normally, the shirt fits, the coat is oversized. But it's not an halachic imperative.
So why have to be the Aron Tachash? The Rambam already saying.
No, but the Rebbe has a different pshat.
I was saying it wasn't...
Page 135 at the bottom.
It's not sneeristic to show the shape of something, because once you define the shape, you know something about it.
Okay, that's beautiful. It's a very good commentary. Bottom of page 135. If you don't mind, I'll help you out there. Keep going. Keep turning pages. Oh. I'm going to read the question and not explain it, okay? Es bleibt doch aber die Kasche, wie ruft man das mit Namen Kebala, lachele doch verkehrt, der Natik wird Bottles, the clear, nicht the clear Natik. Auf dem bringt Rashi, the last line on page 135, Rashi says, Uparso alav beged plani, Each keli had a garment, had a shirt, had an appropriately defined and tailored outfit. The kisui say bemichse plainis, and on top of that was a wrap that was secondary. Now, understand, I'm reading the Sikha, but I'm only taking from it a part of its depth. I'm not concerning myself with the Rashi nuance. I just want to take from the Sikha how the Rebbe explains in Pshutei Shel Mikra all the variations. Now remember, no two are alike, right? No two are alike. The Aron has 3, the Shulchan has 3, but the bread is on top of one, etc., etc. The Rebbe is going to explain every nuance. As Oif, turn the page.
I think the bread's the clue.
Yeder Keli. On every vessel is given nitbois a beged. There wasn't only a shirt or a garment that was tailored for itself. Page 136. But also additionally a wrap. Says the Holy Rebbe, was der chilik from beged mizmichse is the distinction between a shirt, a garment, and a wrap is as a beged is zugepasst. The shirt is tailored to the zach welches is angetan in ihr. It's tailored to the thing that's wearing it. As opposed to a covering, is stamatzudek. It's simply an extraneous covering. Was hat nit kein shayches mit die Zach welche sie is verdeckt, which is not connected directly to the thing it's covered. The Balda declare Kodesh have got 2 nartekim. All the holy vessels had a minimum of 2 coverings. When Erev was given a michse, one was a wrap, nit came beged, not a shirt, a tunic that was appropriately tailored to itself. Verdan, the kli tuffel for the nartek, because it's not a shirt that enhances the vessel, but completely covers it, it's called swallowing it up. When it's been ungerufen balu, as if it's been swallowed up. In other words, usually you put on clothing, the clothing enhance you. Here the Torah says you're covering with clothing and it disappears. Because a shirt enhances you. Just throw a blanket over something, it covers it over. The din is by tefillin is. Sorry? When the tefillin is sitting in a garment, a bag that's appropriate for itself. It's a feel of kisim. You can have 100 bags, one inside the other. But the alle 100 kisim, all 100 bags are specified for this bear. Hey, it's nit kin kis in it. You can't. There's a problem with knias and so forth in such an environment. There's 2 bags. Kli a vessel inside a vessel. And only one of them is nit meyuchas to the tefillin. It's not specific to the tefillin. Hey, it's just like kisei. So the garment that's meant for the vessel is called a shirt, a beged. The garment that's not meant for the vessel is called a kisui, a michse, and each one of the Keilim had both. You had to have a beged and a michse. Okay, we're going to skip. We're going to the paragraph, the paragraph that begins with the word vet. Okay, vet. It's the 3rd paragraph from the bottom. You know what? I'm going to save time. I'm not going to read this. I'm going to read where I made my arrows. The Rebbe has a very interesting observation. You had to cover the vessels, right? One covering of the vessel honored the vessel. The other covering of the vessel made it disappear, swallowed it. The Aron HaKodesh has 3. Why? The Shulchan has 3. The table has 3. Why? None of the others have 3. We'll find out soon why. The first of the 3 by the Holy Ark was the Parshas, the curtain. So the Rebbe makes a logical observation, a really, really simple but logical observation. It's like this. The Keilim had poles sticking out to carry. How do you take a wrap, completely cover something, and have poles sticking out? You have 2 possibilities. Either you make a hole in the curtain, or you make a slit. You cannot do either to the Parshas. Right? This is the curtain that's used in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So the Rebbe says the parechas didn't properly cover the Aron. It was on top of the Aron, but you cannot say that it embraced it, that it hugged it, because it wasn't tailored. It wasn't the size. The other vessels who had, let's say, a wool garment, whatever the case was, they either made a hole in it, or they made a slit that allowed the poles to protrude. So it was useful and exact in its measurements to the vessel. The parechas was just a wrap. Additionally, the parechas itself has a kedusha, has a sanctity into itself. Because the parecha has a sanctity into itself, you cannot count it as one of the two coverings.
It was made specifically to cover it.
Since the Aron HaKodesh, A, it didn't cover properly. B, it had its whole holiness. You weren't covering the Aron. You were covering the Aron and the parechas. So you need two more. You need two more because the parechas is not an adequate covering, and the parechas has its own kedusha. So on top of the Aron and the parechas comes the tachash and the tchelis. And some of the Pashtonim say that it actually was first the tchelis, then the tachash. But that's not traditional mikra. Just flip over your package.
And nonetheless, the parochet did cover to some degree.
Oh yeah.
So in some sense, it is a kisui.
You know, I'll give you a Kabbalistic allusion. In Kabbalah, they speak about parsaot, curtains. Normally, they speak about a parsa between klipa and kedusha, between the lower worlds and the world of Elokut. Then there is a parsa between Kodesh and Kodesh HaKadosh, between holy and the holy of holies. There's a mime of Nalton Rebbe in Teira Eir, one of the first Parshas, where he brings up Parechas mime. Parsois, maybe Vayera. The Parechas was a covering, but it wasn't a covering between holy and ordinary. It was a covering between the holy of holies and holy. So yes, it protected the holy of holies of the Aron from holiness, but its holiness needed to be covered twice. So above the Parechas, that on some level provided a protection, because the Aron wasn't stam holy, it was holy of holies, you had to have two more coverings. Verstehst?
So I guess they have a third, no? Has to have also coverings, extra covering, no?
You have to have a second covering so it can be considered protected with tznius and so on. The beged, the garment of the shirt, the can be the first, and you have to have one more, but that one more has to be alien, has to be foreign, has to be not normal. Here we go. So page 137. Up here now, it resolves a different question that the commentaries ask. Why does the Aron have three coverings? The curtain, an animal skin, and a garment completely of wool above. Not like the rest of the vessels. That's simply two coverings. Is there more mevaiden them? There are more in the spiritual Chumash, I suppose, explains. While the Aron is given Kodesh v'Yosef, the Holy Ark was very holy. It therefore required a third covering. That's what the Ramah says.
Where is the Ramah comment on Chumash?
I don't know. There's a commentary on Ramah Chumash. Maybe it's one of his other svarim, but he makes a reference. The Rebbe doesn't. There's no footnotes here. I don't know. It may be.
He's the comment in halacha. You see the Ramah.
The Ramah wrote a lot of svarim. The fi'anal aber is its mechachilik in kashinitz. But based on our commentary, says the Rebbe, it's not a question at all. Oich der Aron had gehat auf sich blois. The Holy Ark also had only two coverings. While the Parechas HaMasach hat him nit herumgedeckt mikol tzadaf. The curtain that separated between the Holy of Holies was not an adequate covering. So yes, it covered to some degree. Because it didn't cover comprehensively, completely, you needed two more on top. Neither was there, moreover. The Parechas allein is doch euch von der Klei Mishkan. The curtain itself is sanctified. It's one of the vessels of the Mishkan. Darf bemele haben auf sich zwei Kisuyim. So the Parechas needs two coverings. As the andere Klei Mishkan, the rest of the vessels of the Mishkan. Uneich benegeh dem Aron, and also regarding the Aron, heißt es nicht, it's not considered the Aron gehat auf sich 3 kisuyim, because the Parshas didn't cover complete. Okay? So, this explains the Aron. The Parshas doesn't really count completely, because it didn't properly cover it. Then went the Tachash, then went the blue one. Next paragraph. Of them, was man hat gesagt früher, the fact that we said before, as alle klei Mishkan gehat auf sich 2 kisuyim. Each one of the vessels had 2 coverings. One that was like a shirt, and the other was like a wrap. As they did by tefillin, like the law by tefillin is, as a muzen zayin and akli b'tech kli, a vessel inside a vessel. And one of the vessels has to be not naturally suited for the tefillin. Ken men fragen l'chayda. The Rebbe analyzes more of the detail of how these coverings were done. Remember, no 2 are alike. You have every variation in this design. Wegen dem Mizbeach hachitz, the outer Mizbeach. Steht es written, as auf dem Mizbeach hat man verspäht a beged al-gomen. On top of the Mizbeach they put a purple, a very dark red garment. Auf dem beged, on top of this garment, hat man aruf gelegt, the Kli Mizbeach, they put the vessels of the Mizbeach. The utensils of the Mizbeach. And auf them, and on top of the utensils of the Mizbeach, has given a kisui atachash. They covered it with the animal skin. Kum tachuis, it turns out, as the Kli Mizbeach, the utensils of the Mizbeach, ham gehat auf sich blois, ein kisui.
They became themselves
They have only 1 covering, not 2. Dem kisui atachash, the animal skin. The Mizbeach allein hat gehat 2 kisui. The Mizbeach had 2. The beged agoman mit dem kisui atachash, the beged, the purple one, the beged atachash. Oh, but the Kli Mizbeach hat ein kisui. Question: why was it okay for the vessel of the outer Mizbeach to have only 1? Now, the menorah, because they put the rack on top, had to have 2 more coverings. The Mizbeach HaPnimi, the Keilim were wrapped separately, 2 coverings. The menorah's vessels were wrapped together with the menorah, 2 coverings. How come the outer Mizbeach's vessels, the utensils, need only 1 covering? There are tiras of them. And the answer: the Kli Mizbeach seine blois atafos the Mizbeach. The utensils of the Mizbeach are secondary to the Mizbeach. Und they werden bottled to him. They're totally secondary to it. Und the Rebbe, consequently, is the beged agomen, the very dark red garment, was hat machase gewend the Mizbeach, that covered the Mizbeach, is as keilu, it is as though we had machase gewend euch the Keilim, as though it covered the utensils. In other words, there was some reason that the utensils had to be separated from the Mizbeach. The important thing was the Mizbeach was covered twice. That the vessel was covered twice, since the Mizbeach was covered twice, it was okay that its vessels were not.
So the vessels lay on the argaman?
Right. Between the argaman and the tachash.
And the argaman served as a kisui for the mizbeach.
That's right. For the beged for the Mizbeach. The tachash is the kisui.
For the beged of the... No, the argaman was the beged.
Right. And on top of the beged
It
was...
served as a... Well, the first kisui of the mizbeach.
Right, but in the Chumash...
In the Keilim were me'al ala argaman. And then there was a kisui.
Of tachash, right.
That's always very red.
Wait, but then the question becomes backwards. How come by the Mizbeach HaKetayis you have to have 2 coverings on the Keilim? How come by the Shulchan they put a 3rd covering because of the situation? Right? If the Keilim are secondary, then they should be secondary all over. Skip the next paragraph. Is there beard in them? You see where I'm reading? 2nd paragraph on the bottom. Since the vessels are secondary to Mizbeach. In other words, their kedusha is given kleiner for kedusha to Mizbeach. Their holiness was less than the holiness of Mizbeach itself. You had to separate zwischen the Mizbeach and the Keilim. You couldn't put the vessel of the Mizbeach on the same plane as the Mizbeach itself. You had to separate to distinguish, to indicate that this is a lesser Kiddush. But on the other hand, alternatively, the Mizbeach was already covered with a purple covering. Wow, it's late. It provided, philosophically, in Higoyin, a covering for the Keilim as well. So, in other words, the Rebbe is explaining technically the precision. You had to cover the Mizbeach twice. You had to separate the Mizbeach and its own Keilim. The Keilim were not that important that they should warrant 2 more coverings above itself. So although the Keilim only covered once, the Argaman covering, which was beneath it, was in idea, in concept, giving them tznius as well.
And why were the Keilim of the Shulchan?
Wait.
They did have
Yeah. You gotta give the Rebbe some time. Yeah.
That's the intermediate one.
over here.
Explain everything.
Was covered once. The Keilim were covered once.
That's
It's
right.
enough. It's enough for it.
That's right.
Our Takash was enough for the
That's
Keilim,
right. Dieselbe Sache is ich bin dem Shulchan. The same is true regarding the table. Was zu wünschen dem Shulchan mit die Keilim is given a Beget Chelas. What did they do? You had a table. On top of the table was a huge rack with breads. They slid the table out, covered it with blue wool, and put the rack with the breads on top. Why? The rack is not considered a table, it's considered a vessel. Vessels are considered secondary. So you have to separate the table from its vessels. Turn the page. Not after became. Still, is oiv de klei shulchan atzmam given tzvei kisuyim. But by the table you have to have 2 more coverings. Right? By the Adam Mizbeach, you put the purple, the vessels one on top, and you didn't care that the vessels weren't covered twice. But with the shulchan you did care. You know why? He already told us the answer. Because of the bread. Since the bread was in the rack, and the rack was on top of the blue, mitzad the rack itself, 1 more cover will be sufficient. But the bread is like a carbon. And it's achilas bailim, achilas adam, which is higher than achilas mizbeach. So you had to have 3 coverings in the shulchan by default. 1 covering to cover the shulchan, the shirt for the shulchan. And it also had to act as a separation between the shulchan and its keilim. But because there was bread with the keilim, you needed 2 more coverings. By the order you had 3 because the parechas doesn't really count, or the parechas is itself holy. By the shulchan you have 3 because once you separate the keilim from the shulchan, you need 2 more coverings. Not because of the keilim, because of the bread.
The
Three.
The Keilim were covered twice then.
Yeah, but not for their own sake.
Yeah.
But to honor the bread. Fourth line on the page, 138. The rack itself, the vessels of the table are secondary to the table. Since the bread was also on top of the blue garment, the bread is not secondary, but may not make it have 2 more kisuyim for the sake of the bread. Good? Now you have a different question. So what did we explain so far? The Adam Mizbeach's Keilim have to be separated from the Mizbeach. So you put purple. The fact that the Adam Mizbeach vessels are not covered twice doesn't bother us. It's secondary. The Shulchan's vessels have to be separate from the Shulchan. So you put blue. You really only need 1 more covering. You have 2 more coverings because of the bread. What about the menorah? The menorah's vessels were not separate from the menorah by itself. The menorah and the vessels went together. No, there was no mechitza between the menorah and its vessels. On top of the combination, they put blue and tachash. What about this issue that the utensils of the vessel are secondary to it? So, Aranga hat das Stickel Rambam. Men kann nicht fragen. There is no question. Von dem, was by the Orden is nicht given, came back, it was hat mafse given zwischen the menorah and the keilim. You cannot wonder why by the menorah there wasn't this separation between the vessels. Weil wegen der Menorah sagt auch der Rambam, about the Menorah Rambam says, they used to carry it outside to light it. A Yisrael could light the Menorah. They would in other words, the Menorah itself has a lesser Kedusha. Since the Menorah itself has lesser Kedusha, hat man nicht gedacht haben, kein Davar HaMasik, zwischen dem und der Keilim.
Closer level to its instruments.
Right. Now, right, everything fits. So far, so good. Right? What about the inner Mizbeach? The inner Mizbeach was like this. You had a blue.
How do you cover the menorah? You have to light the menorah.
No,
During transport.
Transport.
This is just for the sake of transport, right? The Mizbeach, they had a problem because there was an Eish Tamid. So now it says they put a psachte, a copper vessel. Now, how it breathed, leave it to God. But it was when they were traveling. But the inner Mizbeach is a wrench. You know why? How was the inner mizbeach designed? They had a shirt and a tachash skin. The tools, the utensils in the mizbeach were carried separately in two coverings, blue and the tachash skin. So the Rebbe, if we're saying that the utensils are always secondary to the vessel, why not put the utensils of the mizbeach, inner mizbeach together with the inner mizbeach and cover it once like the outer mizbeach? Man darf noch aber verstehen, was haben die Keilim Mizbeach Hazav gedacht haben auf sich zwei Kisuim. Why was it necessary to have two coverings? Und die Kasha verempfet, Rashi mit seinem Pirush, if it's called Klei Hashar, the Shosam HaKodesh. Rashi answers this question, the Rashi you kept looking at in Pasuk Yud Beis. As HaKodesh meant, B'toich HaMishkan Shu Kodesh. Those things that even inside the Mishkan stand out as holy. But this is their call as HaMishkan. That the word inside the Mishkan that's holy is the whole Mishkan as a whole. Also the Holy of Holies. And when Rashi explains that this means specifically the utensils used for the incense. What das meant that he means the incense itself, which also wrapped twice, which was in the Holy of Holies. Is this man nit? Was mit dieselbe Keilim hat Mishalas given Eich Mizbeach Apnimi. The incense went with the vessels of the incense altar. The incense partially went into the Holy of Holies. So we're all together.
Makes sense all the way around.
Say it again.
Und der Riber. The next paragraph, 2 lines from the end. Und der Riber hat man die Keilim nicht gelegt zusammen mit dem Mizbeach. You therefore didn't put these vessels with the Mizbeach itself. Weil wie bald, dass man hat sie genutzt euch in Keidesh HaKadoshim, these utensils were used even in the Holy of Holies, haben sie gehad agressive die Kedusha, wie Kedusha am Mizbeach.
Same level.
Higher. The utensils of the inner Mizbeach were holier than the inner Mizbeach itself. Because they were used in the Holy of Holies, on Yom Kippur. So not only were these utensils not secondary, they couldn't even carry them together. It all fits. And the stuff that I'm skipping is how this is consistent with the Rashi, traditional Mikra. That's mamish genius. You know, all this in the Rashi, everything is exact.
So how were these carried there?
They put them in basically they put them like in a sack of blue, and the top of that was a tachash, and they put it on a staff, on a rod, and they carried it on their shoulder. For the inner Mizbeach alone. Right. Now, Rabbi say, go to the bottom of page 139. I could be here all night.
Not a bad idea.
The Holy Ark had his coat on top of his shirt, which is odd. Correct? I'm sorry, a shirt on top of his coat. Now, the Rebbe doesn't go into why. He actually does. He does. You know what? I changed my mind. Second paragraph on the top, 139. Second paragraph on the top. There's a precision, a nuance in the precision of the pasuk. They put on, remember how did it go? The Holy Ark now. The Parshas covered it. On top of there went the tachash skin. On tachash skin went the tunic of blue wool. The shirt was on top of the coat. So the pasuk says, "V'nasnu lav kisei tachash," they covered it with the animal skin. Uparsu beged klil, a garment completely trails of blue wool. Was on top of that. Says the Rabbi, all the Keilim, by all the vessels, rechen teire frier. First went the beged, the shirt. Nachdem dem kisei tachash, then went the coat, the tunic, the poncho. By the mother was a cat, frier kisei tachash, and then noch beged. First you wear your coat, then you wear your shirt. It's for as I was learning the Ramban that I showed you at the beginning of the class. Like I said, you have to read the pasuk as though the pasuk is not in order. And in fact, the blue went beneath the tachash. Third line of that paragraph, please. From Pirush Rashi is kentig nitazay. It's implicit that Rashi doesn't agree with the Ramban. And Rashi holds that in fact the blue was on top of the tachash. Okay. Next paragraph at the beginning, please. Fun dem is muchach. This indicates as the beged klul techeles, that the garment completely of blue. Afal piyaz at heismit namen beged. He's called a shirt. Is a nid given to the pas nemarin. He couldn't possibly have been tailored to the precise size of the yarn. V'bal der kisei apnimi from the tachash, the inner skin of tachash, is given nit came baged. It wasn't a shirt, not a mechser a wrap. Was is nit given which was by imperative not tailored precisely to the yarn. Is doch nicht shaykh. It's impossible as the kisei achitzin so sein gefim midasei. How could the outer one be tailored when the inner one is not? I was a heismit namen beged. We call it garment. Is weil is given a beged. He was a garment. Where to under the Keilim. All the other vessels had wool underneath. It was their shirt. Was euch sei hat man zugedeckt mit der beged chel. They also were covered with wool. Und to say is a given a beged. Zugebaski midasem. All the other vessels, the wool was tailored to their size. So even though by the yarn it was not tailored like a shirt, because of its similarity to the other garments, we're calling it a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Next paragraph. It says, kein kashenit. There's no question. Wer sollten die kennen nutzen demselben Beged? How could you use the same kind of a shirt? Welcher man genutzt zum Orden, used for the Holy Ark. Auch zu die andere Kel for the remaining vessels. Welcher seinen gewähnt wenig im Kodesh nemarin. It would seem that it's not appropriate to cover other vessels the same way you would cover the Holy Ark. So the Rebbe says that's why it was reversed. In Pshutei Shal Mikra, Rashi learns the reason the Tachash was underneath and the wool was on top was because the wool would have been underneath. You would not be able to use wool underneath by the others. Because you couldn't replicate what you did for the Holy Ark by the rest. So by the Orden you made it backwards. You put the wool on top and the kisei underneath. So it allows that for the other begodim, you could use the wool underneath. Even by the Orden, the wool on top is called the shirt. Well, the kisei underneath is called the wrap. But it was done this way so that by the other garments, you could put the wool underneath. Please, forgive me. Varum v'bal, third line. As by the Orden is given, below is their kisei achitz. And since in the Orden they put the wool on the outside, if das was by the Orden is given a kisei achitz, this that in the Holy Ark is secondary on the outside, is by andere Keilim, but it can't sign a kisei achitz. But the rest could be in a garment. Showing. And on the bottom of the page, I made one last arrow. I have one more after this, but one last arrow right now, where the Rebbe says it teaches a halacha and the flaw, a nigludik halacha. That when you have to cover something twice, so that it can be considered tzniistic. One covering is allowed to be a regular outfit of that item. Another covering has to be alien. You could put the plastic bag underneath your tefillin bag, as long as it's double. Just like by the Orden, the alien garment was beneath the shirt that was designed to its specifications. We answered every question. Now, I wasn't planning to do this, but I'm not stopping. Next week, I want to continue this. We have a medrash, and a barbanel, a minute, the Rekanti, and then the Rebbe's conclusion, the Gavaldik. Okay, this is